Today, Open Source Security is talking to Lars Wirzenius. Lars, I'm very excited to have you here, man. Lars has a project, a CI/CD, like distributed CI/CD called Ambient. We'll talk all about it and cover that. But why don't you introduce yourself, tell us what we're doing, and we'll talk about Ambient and the challenges of CI/CD systems. And just, it's going to be a really fun chat, I think.
Hello, I'm Lars. I have way too many hobby projects, of which Ambient is one.
Awesome.
And Ambient is, like you said, a CI/CD system. It is something I started writing 2 years ago. It started when I had two of my British friends visiting me in Helsinki, and we were having breakfast at a restaurant and bitching and moaning about how awful CI systems are.
Yes.
And Daniel and Rob agreed with me that they are awful, and then it turned out that we started talking about what would a good CI system be like. And later that day, we invented the name Ambient. And once you have a name, you cannot not do a project.
Hey, the name is the hardest part, so...
Without the name, you can't do Git in it.
That's right. Okay, and I really want to dive in because I've read some of your writings on this and I've looked at your project and it's very, very exciting. But let's kind of start out with the challenges and why we don't like existing CI/CD systems, because I think setting the stage first before you talk about what you're doing probably makes some sense here. So you had a whole conversation at breakfast about why CI/CD systems are terrible. So fill us in.
So from a user experience, the worst thing about CI is that you don't have hands-on access.
Yeah.
Something runs, it fails. If you're lucky, you get a log from what failed, and from that you have to deduce what fixed things.
Yeah.
So you make a change, you push a change, CI runs again, you wait again, you wait again, you wait again. Eventually you get a log, and maybe something has changed. This is in many ways similar to what programming was like decades ago.
Yeah.
On mainframes, batch programming. And it was frustrating then as well. I am not quite old enough to have been in that era, but
Nice.
The previous generation of students at my university had been there, and they had, if you got drunk, there was no end to how much they would bitch about this. Anyway, that was the user experience. Another part of the user experience is that typically CI is a shared resource.
Yeah.
It's something that your whole team, possibly your organization shares. So sometimes queues are very long, and the longest I have personally experienced is 2 days.
Youch.
That was at a large organization, non-profit of which you have heard, that has thousands of hobby volunteer contributors, and a CI system that sometimes has thousands of jobs in a row before yours.
Wow.
After those 2 days, what I got was a bash syntax error.
Oh my goodness, that's terrible.
So I fix, I push, and I wait again. From the point of view of running CI for yourself or someone else, hosting CI if you wish, it tends to be insecure and unsafe.
Yeah.
You say, I host a CI system, you push a change. On my system, your code runs. Since you are a good person, that's fine, but someone else might push something malicious.
That's right.
And it might be a Bitcoin miner, or it might be a DDoS attack, or it might be something else. It might be attacking my CI system directly. I'm running your code on my system. It's a risk. And Ambient is not the first CI system I'm building, but basically I have been careful about not running CI for other people because of this.
Yeah. I mean, by definition, it's arbitrary code execution, right?
Yes. And remote arbitrary code execution.
Yeah. Okay.
But those were the big things. There were a bunch of other smaller things. One is that for the kinds of things I personally like to do, containers aren't good enough.
Yeah.
Because for most of the current crop of CI systems run things in containers so that you can at least a little isolate the code under test from the host system and possibly the rest of the universe. And containers have some fundamental limits, like the kernel you run on in the container is the same kernel as on the host. And if what you want to do is test a different kernel version, containers aren't helping.
Yep.
Or you want to test a different operating system or a different CPU architecture. Containers are of no help.
That's right.
Containers are wonderful for many things, but not for this.
For sure. Okay, so let's dive into Ambient then, because you've put together it's a Rust project. I'll put a link in the show notes to where you can go find it. Sure. But it's intriguing to me what you've done. So give us the like high level overview of your idea and your project, and then we'll kind of dive into some of the places that I think it's very clever.
So the core idea of Ambient is that the code under test runs in a virtual machine without network access. When the virtual machine starts, the VM is given a certain amount of CPU cores, certain amount of RAM and disk space, and the runtime is limited. It can do things to attack the hosts, but it's fairly constrained about what it can do. It runs on the same CPU, so there are interesting Spectre-like attacks, but otherwise it's fairly contained in a little virtual machine.
Right. Okay. So we understand that virtual machines give us advantages over the kernel, right? And yes. Now you've decided to limit network access, which I go back and forth on this one, because one of my favorite things to do in most CI systems is just to apt-get install whatever I need at that moment because I'm lazy and I don't have to prepare anything. So what does a world look like where I have a CI runner that isn't accessing the network and can't install things? Like what do I have to do to make that work?
So obviously this, I call it them dependencies. Things that you have to get from somewhere and install in the virtual machine to be able to do what you want to do. It might be apt packages, deb packages, it might be Rust crates or other libraries like that. So before the virtual machine starts, Ambient downloads the dependencies.
Okay.
And at the moment, given Ambient is very, very early stages, it can download Rust dependencies. At the moment, it doesn't download Debian packages or any other packages because I build a virtual machine image that has all the software installed that I need.
Right.
And that's a known limitation of Ambient. This needs to be fixed because not everyone likes building virtual machine images. I like to do that.
Sure.
But I'm a little weird.
Fair enough. Okay. And so walk us through this. So we've got our virtual machine image. Let's say we have all of our dependencies and everything installed correctly. Now, if there's no network access, how are we getting information from the build out, right? Because generally speaking, I'd say when we're doing our CI, you monitor it, right? You're watching log files. You're watching things happen, which, although I don't know, I guess you could do that with a console as well. But I know you have some clever things you're doing on how to get things out of these systems, which is very exciting.
So all the data that gets input to the virtual machine or output from the virtual machine is via virtual block devices using tar archives. Specifically, tar archives are not file system images, because file system images are an attack vector to the host kernel.
That's right.
And I should point out at this point that I'm not a security expert. I just like my things to work. But that means I have to care about security, because otherwise things don't work very long.
That's right. That's right.
Anyway, of my two British friends, Daniel and Rob, they've been advising me on giving me feedback on designing Ambient. I've done all the coding, but without them, and especially Daniel, Ambient would be much worse.
Nice.
And he said that I must use tar archives, not disk images, not file system images, because you can crash the kernel. So in the VM, you can become root and you can corrupt the file system. And then when the host kernel, the VM shuts down and the host kernel mounts the file system, and that can crash the whole kernel. X4, for example, has a nice little setting in the file system where it tells the kernel what to do if there's corruption.
Yep.
And one of the options is panic.
That's right. There was just a security report that came out maybe a month or two ago about exactly that someone made a USB drive with an ext4 file system on it that was corrupted and told the kernel to panic. And they were just plugging it into random things to see what happened. And most things panicked, as one would expect, which was, it was pretty funny, but unfortunately.
Tar archives can also be an attack vector. Any data can be an attack vector, but if the system tar is vulnerable, then you have problems. Yeah. If the tar installed on your system is vulnerable to an attack from reading a tar file, then you have problems.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's also important to point out that when Ambient runs tar to extract the tar archive, tar runs in user mode, not as in the kernel.
Sure. Right.
Yeah. Which also limits the fallout.
Yeah.
There is also two virtual serial consoles. One which the kernel boots on, and one where the run log from the CI run goes.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. And obviously that's where you can log things to a file, but also many CI systems we're looking at the output as it scrolls past. Okay.
Yes.
So there's another piece of this, the piece that has me the absolute most excited. So right now, we'll say geopolitically, there is more attention than ever being paid to like where things are hosted and how things work, right? Be it there are countries folks don't want to be hosting software in or running jobs or whatever. And one of the things that this gives you the ability to do, and I know this is way in the future, right? This is not an ability that exists today, but I know you talked to me about having the ability to do like distributed CI, where because you've locked this down, because this is running in VMs, like Lars could run like an ambient system that's taking jobs from somewhere, running them, and then sending the output back. And so we have this environment where instead of relying on one behemoth company running tons of CI systems, we can talk about spreading things out. And like in the context of, I'll use Codeberg as my example here, where like Codeberg CI is notoriously bogged down because it's a volunteer project. They don't have like millions and millions of systems. Like that's an example where you could have like community involvement in helping run a CI. So explain this concept to me, because in all seriousness, I was like, that is the part of this that has me just delighted when I learned about it.
Sure. I'm now going to speculate a little because this has not been implemented.
You can speculate. You're the one making it.
But also it has been implemented under a different name. I'll get to that in a moment. So the reason why Ambient is called Ambient is that in that breakfast session, the thing we really wanted is that you don't have to set up CI. You don't have to create an account on a CI system.
Yeah.
CI is just there. It's in the atmosphere. It's ambient. That's where the name comes from. I'm not quite there yet, but it's only been 2 years. Anyway, the idea is that assuming we can actually make it safe and secure to run CI on anyone's code under Ambient, and assuming people are willing to donate compute for this, we could have a network of volunteers that provide CI capacity. But like they have a laptop that's idle while they're at work, they could run CI on that laptop, leave it on. Assume they're willing to pay the power and other costs from this. And then their laptop or any other node running CI could listen to some kind of more or less centralized network of CI controllers that notice that, oh, there's a change to this Git repository or that Git repository and so on. And then they tell these nodes running Ambient that, hey, could you run CI on this repo, this branch, this commit? And then Ambient runs and reports back to the controller, and the person who's changed this gets notified in some way, some magic, imaginary way, that CI has run and there was syntax error in your bash script. Because that's always.
Yes. Exactly.
Anyway, that was I call it the megalomaniac vision of Ambient. The thing I've actually implemented so far is a command line program that I can run, and that runs Ambient for me or locally with no other nodes. However, the exciting thing is that I now don't need to actually implement this server controller side, because I work for a project called Radicle, and specifically on CI with Radicle, and we have integrated Ambient to that, so that when a Radicle node that has the Radicle CI component installed, it can run CI using Ambient. The Radicle CI is designed so that it can use any number of what we call adapters for different CI systems. And I made an adapter for Ambient that just runs Ambient locally.
Oh, cool.
And Radicle is a distributed peer-to-peer Git forge, basically.
Yeah.
So I have at least 3 or 4 Radicle nodes myself, 2 of which run CI for me. So I make a change on my laptop, I push that to a patch on Radicle. One of my CI nodes notices that, oh, there's a patch, I'm supposed to run CI on this, let me do that. And then it runs and I get notified.
Wow, that's pretty cool. But now, the peer-to-peer nature of Radicle, does your CI... I'll explain what Radicle... Well, I'll let you explain what Radicle is momentarily. But so, if you have multiple nodes, which node knows to run the CI job when you make a change to Radicle? Because the whole point of Radicle is it's peer-to-peer, right?
Yes.
How is that sorted?
So everyone who sets up a CI node for Radicle gets to choose what kinds of changes they run CI for. So I might say that I run CI for all of my nodes and your nodes.
Oh, I see.
But
Okay.
not anyone else's, my repositories, your repositories, or any changes to any repository that I have made a change to. And there's a whole Boolean logic tree there that you can do. And if you and I happen to work on the same project, then obviously we will together set up a CI node that runs CI for both of our changes.
Sure. Okay. That's cool.
But if a third party makes a change to one of our repositories, we don't have to run CI for them.
Right.
Or I might decide that I'm the world's richest person. I can afford to run CI for anyone's changes.
Nice. Okay, we have to explain what Radicle is, I think, because I think it's very clever. I've toyed with it a little bit. I'm nervous to like make the leap into using Radicle for everything, because I'm the peer-to-peer concept I love, but it always makes me nervous of like, if my computer crashes, how do I know that everything is somewhere else? So explain what Radicle is to us, because I do like it.
So Radicle is a Git-based peer-to-peer decentralized distributed, I to go for a bit more synonyms. A peer-to-peer distributed Git hosting system, or like we like to call it a Git-based collaboration system. So basically everyone who runs Radicle runs a node. They decide what repositories are present on the node. It might be their own repositories, or they might have cloned them from somewhere else. And for each repository, you can have issues or patches in the repository. They're under a different namespace, so they don't show up as branches or tags, but they're there in the repository if you know how to look for them. In the refs directory, in the Git directory, you can see what is there. And all of these nodes connect to each other. So each node connects to some nodes, not to all the other nodes.
Right,
There's too many of those. And then they gossip. So my node might talk to your node and say, I know of these other nodes. They have these repositories with these refs, and their refs are at these stages. So Joss's master branch on this repository is at this commit, and whatever else. This is just fairly lightweight, low bandwidth gossiping, so that every node learns about what's available on other nodes.
Right.
There's also what we call public seed nodes that are well known, so that when you first start a node, it connects. When you install Radicle and create a node and it starts, it doesn't know about any other nodes it could gossip with. So it connects to one of these well-known public nodes and starts gossiping from there.
Yeah. Which is, all peer-to-peer systems do a similar thing today, where they're not exactly peer-to-peer, but it's close enough. So yeah, I love all this stuff. I love all this peer-to-peer stuff that's being worked on, because I feel like, especially right now, it feels more important than it ever has before in the history of tech. So
I agree.
Yeah, things are getting weird, man. Now the one challenge with Radicle, and I don't know if you have a solution to this. I've not done like enough extensive reading, but obviously when you're trying to like clone, I don't know if you call it clone in the Radicle world, that's what I call it. You need to know the like Radicle ID of the thing you're working with. And it's not as easy necessarily as just a simple URL like github.com/joshbressers/whatever. Right.
Yeah.
So, the discovery is definitely a challenge. Is there a good way around that, or is it basically just find out where the thing is you need?
I'm not sure we have a good solution for that,
It's
but
tough,
it is
yeah.
it is a thing that we are working on. I tend to stick to one or two repositories plus all the ones I create myself.
Sure.
So I haven't needed to do discovery as such. But certainly there needs to be some way of finding those.
Yeah.
It's difficult to do in a peer-to-peer system, it's harder to do a search
Yes.
feature. GitHub is really easy. They have everything on one machine, so it's just a search. Basically a grep on the file system. I'm simplifying a little.
Close enough.
But doing grep on other people's machines is difficult if they don't let you.
Yeah. For sure. And it's a problem that needs to be solved. Like the Fediverse has similar problems. They all have it. It's not solved. Sure. We're working on it. All right. So I don't have a lot of I have a lot of questions, but I don't want to bore people with just Josh grilling Lars about what he's doing right now. But I'll put links to Radicle and Ambient in the show notes. I will give you the floor, Lars, for just kind of the end. What do you want people to know? What do you think they should pay attention to? It's whatever you want. Like, fill this up with knowledge.
You ask the most difficult questions.
What? That's a great question.
Yes, but it's difficult.
I know. It's completely open-ended. Good luck.
So I will repeat. Still early days for Ambient. So I've got the basics working. It's what I've been using for about 6 months now.
Nice.
As almost my only CI system. There's one project that I collaborate with someone else who isn't ready to do a switch to Radicle. And therefore, we use gitlab.com for that. But it's fine. I can keep an eye on the competition.
There you go.
Like I said, it's currently a command line program that is integrated with Radicle. I wouldn't object to someone else creating a server side for Ambient that is independent of Radicle. Sure. But at the moment, I have no personal motivation to work on that.
That's fair.
Ambient is very much a hobby project for me that I work on in my free time. And I have no free time because Anyway.
Yeah.
We are experimenting with using Ambient as the CI engine for a service product around Radicle. But that's also early days, so I don't know if Ambient will be good enough. But I would love it if other people would help with Ambient. The smallest, simplest thing is to look at the web pages and tell me, I don't understand this. Or maybe you should mention this or that. I have been thinking about Ambient for 2 years now, and I had another CI system called IC before that. It was called IC because Daniel, again, he's my collaborator, told me that all CI systems are icky. Therefore, I cannot be the CI system and not call it IC.
Oh, nice.
But I have retired IC and nobody else really used it, so it's dead. It was fine while it lasted, but Python 3 killed it.
Oh, was it written in Python 2?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a brutal change, man. I mean, and look, here's the other thing that I always keep in mind, because I just like you, have millions of unfinished, hobby projects. And there's someone showed me a graph the other day that showed like once you hit like 80% of a hobby project, it stops being fun. And I feel like that's exactly the explanation. I make it 80%, I'm like, whatever, I'm done. But the thing that makes me excited about this and what I keep an eye on what you're up to is Ambient, whether it succeeds or not, depending upon what the definition of success is, the lessons you are learning and the things that are going to be uncovered, I think are invaluable. Because we have turned our CI universe back into the old timeshare model. Exactly like you said at the beginning, where we have these large entities controlling this environment. And there's a million reasons you could not like that, whatever it might be. And so the idea of starting to try to find ways to distribute all this, I mean, the same thing with Radicle, why I think Radicle looks so cool, is this whole distributed model excites me for a variety of reasons. Of course, there's other reasons that terrify me, like backing up my stuff. Like if I put a repo in Radicle and then my computer crashes and another node doesn't have my stuff, I'm screwed. But that's a whole other conversation for another day.
Backups.
What's that?
Backups.
Well, yes, obviously. And Lars also has a backup system, which I know. It's easy to say backups. And I try to back up my stuff, but I've done enough backup systems to know that the backup system only fails when you absolutely need it. So like, I've been there, man. All right, Lars, I want to thank you. This has been a treat to get to bug you a little bit about your project. I'll certainly keep an eye on it. I'll put links in the notes for anyone who's interested to go check it out. And yeah, like patch is welcome. If there's something someone has an idea for, whatever, like let Lars know. All right, Lars, thank you so much, man.
Thank you, Josh. Bye.
Bye-bye.